So as Brian mentioned, we're starting out this brand new series, and as I do that, let me start by asking a question, and it's this. Have you ever been asked a question that you weren't quite sure how to answer? I was in pre-op before my surgery last week, and a staff member came and asked me, ready for surgery? And I thought for a minute, and I thought, shouldn't you know if I'm ready for surgery? I'm just laying here. I didn't bring any tools or needles or bone saws. I kind of left that up to you. So can I ask you that question? But sometimes we get asked questions and we're not really sure how to answer for a number of reasons. It might be some very, very good reasons. Could be that it might be because you are truly ill-informed about the subject of the question, can't answer. Or it might be that the question was rhetorical and no answer is even needed. Or it could be that the answer was so obvious you don't even know where to start to begin to answer this question. Here's where I'm going. One day, Jesus asked his disciples a question that somehow fit into all three of those categories. It's pretty interesting. We're going to see that in just a minute, but first let me say this. The greatest question asker of all time was Jesus. I mean, he knew how to get to the heart of an issue with just a single question. You probably remember reading some of these questions as you make your way through the Gospels and the Bible. Questions like this one. Who do you say that I am? Remember when he said that? Who do you say that I am? That question brought Peter to realize his firmest convictions. Just one question. Then later on he says, is it right to do good on the Sabbath, or is it not? And that question revealed the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, who were more concerned about their social influence and their law keeping than they were concerned about a suffering person who was right in front of them. Then later on he says, was John the Baptist from God or no? And that question was posed to the religious leaders who were trying to trap Jesus. And by asking them this, they were the ones that were exposed as the frauds. They couldn't and would not even answer the question when Jesus posed it to them. They thought it would reveal too much, so they just kept quiet. Now, Jesus, he knew the impact of a question. And it was not always because he just always knew the answers to the question that he asked, but because he knew that questions can get to the heart of an issue in a hurry. Now, the Gospel of Matthew records one of the great questions that Jesus asks, and it applies not only directly to the people that were surrounding him at that time, but even today, right now, that question that he asks kind of shines a searchlight into our own hearts that we can't dodge, we can't get away from it. Here's the question, then I'll get to the context of it. It's this. Why are you afraid? Say those words with me. Why are you afraid? So we're going to take a few weeks and put fear under the microscope, because the truth is that fear, unchecked and unchallenged, has the power to cripple your life. And some people in this room know that that is the case. So just for a minute, imagine Jesus looking right at you in your eyes and saying, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? Now, lots of us in our minds, our minds start spinning with that question. We start thinking, really? Are you kidding? Why am I afraid? Do you want my list? Okay. Company I work for is doing another round of layoffs this week. I'm waiting on test results from the doctors. The last tank of gas that I bought cost more than my car's worth. I could keep going. You want to know why I got fears? I got fears with hair on them. Here's what leads up to the question that Jesus asks here. Jesus had gone to his disciples and said, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's go for a boat ride. We'll go to the far side of the Sea of Galilee. We'll have a picnic, cast out some demons. It'll be a great time. Let's go. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So they take off, and here's how it goes in Matthew chapter 8. It says, suddenly a fierce storm struck the lake with waves breaking into the boat. Waves breaking into the boat. That's a bad situation. So a monsoon comes upon them, catches them off guard, and now they're fighting for their lives on the water. I mean, waves are breaking into the boat. Let me just speak a word of caution about how we read and listen to stories like this. Sometimes we don't let them register completely because something just seems amiss about it, so we kind of keep it over in the fairy tale category. Like in this story right here, we think, storms don't come up suddenly. You see them coming. You have warnings of some kind, especially when you got fishermen with you. They're trained to see this kind of thing. This is their life. Now, I have been blessed enough to be on a boat on the Sea of Galilee itself, and it is a spectacularly beautiful lake, but it's an odd one in that it is surrounded by mountains and it obstructs the horizon. So you really don't get much of a warning when storms come up. And it's a big enough lake, Sea of Galilee, to be able to be whipped up pretty badly in a storm. It's 12 miles long, 7 miles wide. So it can be pretty deadly if a really, really bad storm came upon you unaware. Now, beyond that, we all take for granted all of the weather warning systems that are in place today. I mean, if a tropical storm is coming, we hear about it a week in advance, and we hear about it 50 times a day until we're sick of hearing about it. But you know what? 2,000 years ago, you know what their weather warning system looked like? Looks pretty good to me. That was it. Just last century, 1926, a huge, massive hurricane came into the South Florida and the Keys, absolutely wiped it out because they had no warning. Hundreds of people died. That's only 100 years ago. You think about 2,000 years ago, people on boats were at the mercy of weather. So Mark's gospel account of this same event adds an interesting fact. He says, other boats were following them. Now, my thought is that the writers add this kind of stuff from time to time just to remind the readers that there were many, many eyewitnesses to these events that are written about. Now, Matthew, the gospel writer, picks out a really interesting word to describe the storm that they're all experiencing. He didn't use the common word for a storm, a squall, a cloudburst, a thunderstorm. He uses the word seismos, word that's related to earthquakes and tsunamis. So Matthew and the disciples felt a seismos, a violent eruption of wind and waves and towering waves that were coming into the boat, shaking them up pretty hard. Anybody here ever been in a boat in a really bad storm? I have. It can be really, really nasty. Bow is lifting up and then slamming on the ground and shaking you all over the place. You feel like you're in a washing machine. They can scare the snot out of you if you've never been through that before. Pretty violent. Now, only 2 other times does Matthew use this word, seismos. He used it at Jesus' death, at Calvary, when the whole area shook when Jesus died. And then again, when Jesus rose from the dead, it says the graveyard, that whole area shook and graves opened and stuff like that. So this is a big deal to everybody present. So just imagine the situation if you were there. The wind is just howling. The rain is blinding. The waves are pitching you back and forth across the boat. Grown men are screaming. I mean, men really, really like to preserve their cool, if at all possible. Sometimes it's just not possible. Something or another happens, whatever it is, but cool is just out the window. I heard one guy put it like this. I thought it was great. He says, everybody's cool till the cockroach starts flying. I thought that was great. So these guys had abandoned cool in that boat, and they're just hanging on for dear life in this crazy storm. Then that they look over and they see Jesus. Now, the truth is, I wish that you had never read this story before, because I'd love to see the look on your faces when I tell you what comes next. In the midst of all this, it says, Jesus is asleep. He's asleep. Now, that doesn't even seem to be all that helpful, to be honest. I mean, it's crisis time. It's like all hands on deck. Everybody should be grabbing a bucket to bail water or hold on to stuff, grab things so people or stuff don't go overboard, whatever. But he's sleeping? I mean, really? Mark's gospel adds another couple details there. So Jesus was in the stern and he was on a pillow. Why is he back in the stern? And who has a pillow at a time like that? People don't carry pillows around just waiting for a great nap opportunity, do they? They don't. I mean, I think it's a great idea, but generally they don't. Neither do people fall asleep at times like that. You ever fall asleep on a roller coaster? Riding the Hulk at Universal, fall asleep? Or the Manta at SeaWorld and just fall asleep? Doesn't happen. Well, Jesus is probably back in the stern because most fishing boats back then had a little nook, a compartment back there where they stored the heavy fishing nets. There's probably an open little spot right there. He's probably back there. Jesus and his disciples had just come off a flurry of activity. Jesus had been on for a very, very long time. He was healing, he was leading, he was teaching. He's worn out, probably just time for a nap. He looks back and sees a little compartment, looks pretty inviting to him. As for the pillow, it was probably just the ballast bag, not a Swedish memory foam pillow that he pulls out for a nap, but a big leather sack that's filled with sand that's put in the middle of the boat to stabilize the weight of the whole thing. They're up to 100 pounds, these things weigh, and Mediterranean fishing boats use them even to this very day. So that's probably what it was. It was not a goose down pillow, but it'll do in a pinch. So Jesus is sound asleep. So in the midst of all this storm, the disciples are panicking, and for pretty good reason. At this rate, if the boat doesn't break apart, it just might fill up with water and sink. So they're running around frantically trying to save themselves, shouting, the Bible says. Very specifically says that they were shouting. Now, some people shout because they're really good in a crisis. Like, you bail water, you hold the sail, you two guys, you hold the rudder. Other people shout because they melt down in a crisis. We're all going to die. It's earthquake, fire, serenity now, whatever it is. They just start screaming. But finally, somebody notices that Jesus is not with them. And they look over and see that he's back in the stern and he's asleep. And this doesn't sit very well with them at all. So they clamber their way over him, probably still having to hold onto the sides of the boat in order to get back to him. Now, I enjoy reading from multiple translations of the Bible when I'm kind of studying something, because sometimes the phrasing gives you extra insight or some wisdom or perspective. But none of the translations really give the punch that the original New Testament Greek gives in this moment right here. And here's what it reads exactly in the Greek in verse 25. Lord, save, dying. Just 3 words. Lord, say that with me. Lord, save, dying. No wasted words, just panic and fear. And the gospel writer Mark adds the question that the disciples follow up this exclamation with. And it's a really telling question. Here's what it is. Mark 4:38. Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? And we're going to take a hard look at that question because it reveals sort of the flawed human heart that all of us carry. You notice they don't ask Jesus if he's familiar with storms like this. Neither did they ask him if he can do anything about it. Their fearful question carries an accusation with it. Teacher, do you not care? Don't you care? They're calling into question the character of Jesus. Don't you even care about us? So you can see how fear is dismantling their faith. And when our fears cause us to question God like that, the truth is it reveals a lot more about us than it does about him. We use our logic and we think like this, well, Jesus is the one who suggested the boat ride in the first place. We go on and we wonder like, if God allows storms even after I obey him and get in his boat, then is he even keeping his end of the bargain? Fear unleashes swarms of doubt about God, makes us start questioning things that have been proven to us long ago. Fear systematically tries to dismantle our faith. Beyond that, it has a way of dulling our memory, creates spiritual amnesia. I mean, think about it. The disciples had all kinds of reasons to trust in Jesus. I mean, they'd seen him do supernatural stuff all the time. Right before they got on the boat, Jesus was healing people, and they all saw it. You think at least one of them would remember that and just kind of say, wait, everybody, don't panic. It's okay. Jesus can help us. Jesus can do anything. You remember that? Remember what he just did a few hours ago? But nobody does that. Fear creates spiritual amnesia. We forget God's goodness. One guy read the story and commented on it. He said, I would like to think that when that storm came up, that I would just go in by Jesus and go to sleep too. Like I could just ask him if there was room for another head on that pillow. If you think about it, that's the reaction of a trusting child, isn't it? And those here that are parents probably know this. Big thunderstorm hits at night. Before long, you hear the pitter-patter of little feet coming down the hallway and faces appear at the end of the bed. And what do they want? Are they asking you to explain the storm scientifically? No. I think it's just they want to crawl under the covers with you and be next to you. What they want at that point is just closeness. They figure if they're near you, then they're probably going to be okay, and then they're going to be able to go to sleep. So I wonder how this story would read if Peter or James or John or any one of them would have just crawled back into the stern with Jesus and said, you know what, if you're okay, I'm okay. And they just rested. Nobody does. Fear makes us forget the rock-solid foundation that we have in Christ. No wonder Jesus wages such a war on fear. His teachings are filled with the encouragement to just resist fear altogether. Now, if you were to ask people, what was it that Jesus told people more than anything else? They'd probably say, well, to love God or to love your neighbor. And those are good answers, but those are incorrect answers. More than anything else, more than any other command that Jesus gives, is some version of fear not. Fear not. More than any other command. 21 times he says it in some form. I mean, look at what Jesus has said in the Gospels up till this point. Look at all these phrases. Don't be afraid. Take courage. Do not worry. Do not fear. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Why are you frightened? Do not be alarmed. I mean, Jesus couldn't be clearer. He does not want us to live in a state of fear. He doesn't. Fear steals from you. It cripples you. It brings you to regrets. Fear never, ever did you any favors. I mean, tell me what good has ever come from a day that has been filled with fear? Does anybody look back and say, you know, those 6 months that I was living in fear, those were the best 6 months of my life? Or, you know, I'm so grateful for my anxiety. It makes me such a better father. Or these phobias that I carry with me, they just seem to bring out the best in me. Now, the opposite is true, isn't it? The opposite is true. Fear takes our joy. Fear sucks the life out of us. So Jesus looks you right in the eye and says, why are you afraid? Now, personally, I don't like that question. It's invasive, makes me uncomfortable. It prods me in two ways, neither of which I like. First one, it states as a given that I am afraid, and I don't like to admit that. The second thing is, it asks me about things that I just as soon keep hidden. Makes me think like, why am I afraid? Do I want to reveal that? Quietly, I think, I've got mechanisms in place to deal with that. I'm handling it. So I get into avoidance. Or I just won't go there. I just won't do that. I don't do that. Fear makes your life small. Beyond that, fear makes your world get smaller, and all of us have to fight this as we start getting older, because the tendency of the mature is to stop stretching and growing and allowing myself to get into a place where I need God, where I feel nervous or uncomfortable. So too often we build walls of resistance because I don't want that to happen. I'm not doing that. I don't do that. I won't be put in that position. That's fear. That's what that is. It's fear. Now, I know that there are some that are here that are battling some fears that have teeth. I mean, there are real serious issues before you that are challenging your attempt to live fearlessly, and I get that. Waves are crashing in your boat. You might think Jesus is sleeping on the job. But you know what the truth is? God never promised to keep us free from storms. He never said that we would be. Matter of fact, he said the opposite. He clearly warned, John 16, in this world you will have trouble. You will have trouble. Doesn't say it's a possibility that you might have trouble, or you could have trouble. He says it's a certainty. You will have trouble. That's a great line by the author Max Lucado, who said, I love this, getting on board with Christ can mean getting soaked with Christ. Thought that was good. People who follow Jesus are still fully human. We lose jobs, we lose homes, we lose friends. Christians get sick, they get angry, they get taken advantage of, and that's just the truth. Anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something. Now, the beauty of following Christ is that in those storms that we will experience, he said that he would be with us. And here's one of the many reasons why that is great news. Here's what happens next in the story, in the midst of the storm. Verse 26, look at this. Jesus responded, why are you afraid? You have so little faith. Then he got up and rebuked the wind and waves, and suddenly there was a great calm. The disciples were amazed. Who is this man, they asked. Even the wind and the waves obey him. You know, the truth is, the God who calms storms is in your boat with you. He's with you. There's no need to panic. There is a need to develop trust in God. So go to God in your storms, not just to ask him to make them go away, but to help you rest in him and receive his peace in the midst of it. He is fully capable of getting you through it. He is not afraid, and neither should you be. So fear not. Fear not. Here's what it all comes down to, friends. I believe that God is with me in every one of the storms of life that I face. And if I trust him, he just might calm that storm miraculously for me. I'm going to ask him to do it, and I'll believe that he will. But even if he doesn't, I will bet my life on the assertion that he is good and that this world is not run by an absentee landlord. He's in control. He'll either calm the storm or he will calm me. Again, let's look at the words of Jesus as we wrap up here. Don't be afraid. Take courage. Do not worry. Do not fear. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Why are you frightened? Do not be alarmed. Anchor your life, anchor your faith in those words. God holds your life in his hands, regardless of what you're going through, and he will be with you. This very day, some stroke is being added to the cosmic canvas of your life, and it's beautiful. You're being transformed. You're being made into the image of Jesus. And he says that you can become fearless.